Yes, sir. Namaste and greetings. I, Reet Lath, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We're gathered today for a panel discussion on gender, social inclusion, and union budget 2024 to 2025. This deliberation is a part of IMPRI's fifth annual series of thematic lectures and analysis of Union Budget 2024-25, which is a series of panel discussion on crucial key policy issues and Union Budget, involving more than 100 thematic distinguished experts and research team members. This discussion is organized by Gender Impact Studies Center, IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, as a part of IMPRI Web Policy Talk series, The State of Gender Equality, Gender Gaps. Now, let me introduce the esteemed gathering. Our chair for the session is Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished professor, IMPRI, and former professor, TIS Mumbai. We welcome you, ma'am. Today's deliberation comprises of an excellent panel of distinguished experts who will be sharing their expertise, which includes Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar ji, Coordinator, Program Lead, Gender Responsive Budgeting, UN Women India, Professor N. Manimekalai ji, Director, Center for Women Development Studies, New Delhi, Visiting Professor, IMPRI, Dr. Paramita Majumdar ji, Independent Consultant, Shri Sailesh Mishra ji, Founder, President, Silver Innings Group, Ms. Deepa Pawar ji, Managing Trustee and Founder Director, Anubhuti Trust Thane, Dr. Neha Shah ji, Associate Professor, LJ University, Ahmedabad, Professor Paramita Shah ji, Professor, Department of Economics, Tripura University, Dr. Aditi Kapoor ji, co-founder and trustee, Alternative Futures, New Delhi. And lastly, Dr. Aditi Sawant ji, Associate Professor and Head, Department of Economics, St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. We are extremely grateful to have such a distinct panel of experts joining us today. Proceeding further, I welcome all the participants to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and efforts into understanding the nuances of gender and social inclusion within the union budget, while helping us to bring together the practitioners and participants through this course for impactful discussion. Now, without any further ado, let's start our program. It is my honor and privilege to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel ji to start the program with the chair's opening remarks and proceed with the panel discussion. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Reet, for introducing the program panel discussion. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Ms. Reet Lath, and IMPRI team for this Herculean task of putting together a series of 10 panel discussions. And today we are going to focus on social inclusion and even gender aspects, and also with regards to Union Budget 2024. Welcome, esteemed panelists, Dr. Paramita Saha, Dr. Professor Manimekalai, Dr. Aditi Kapoor, Dr. Aditi Sawant, Shri Sailesh Mishra ji, Dr. Neha Shah, and Ms. Deepa Pawar. The Union Budget 24-25 has made promises in terms of productivity and resilience in agriculture, employment and skilling, inclusive human resource development and social justice, boost to manufacturing through the medium and small scale industries and enhancing services, urban development, energy security, infrastructure, R&D, and also the next generation of reforms. Now, this agenda has a great implications for gender equity and social inclusion concerns of large majority of Indians facing multiple intersectional marginalities of class, caste, ethnicity, religion, location, ability, and gender spectrum. Now, in the second decade, what we saw that the gender economist and also over the last 5 years, the networks such as Feminist Policy Collective have emphasized an urgent need for intersectional, participatory, decentralized, and outcome-based gender responsive budgeting. Now, this year, what we see is that the major debate has been around that when the gender budgets, first of all, the allocation is of 3 lakh crores for schemes benefiting women and girls. We need to unpack this. And Pradhan Mantri Jan Jatiya Unnat Gram Abhiyan, which impacts nearly 14% of India's population, which is tribal communities, and for which are who are in the 63,000 villages, and the scheme, the budget talks about it. The major change that we see is that now the gender budget has been divided into 3 parts. Part A encompasses schemes that are 100% targeted to women. Part B includes schemes with 33 to 99% allocation, while Part C in which there are schemes where there are less than the 30% allocation, and it is perceived that gender but what we see, if you read the budget document, even the speech by the Honorable Finance Minister, gender is perceived in a binary framework, and the human development needs and demands of transgender community in terms of education, employment, skilling, health, shelter, and decision making are largely neglected, or you just don't find its mention. Allocation of this program, like 300 crores for women's initiative without time frame, and also clearly not spelling out the strategy, is a problematic. We already have experience of Nirbhaya Fund right from 2013, where 1,000 crores per year have been allocated, but hardly there is a utilization. 4 or 5 states have utilized that to 40 to 60%. States after states have not even used even 1% of the budget. And another thing about Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, also very flagship scheme, where most of the funds is used only for advertisement and publicity, not in the direct intervention in terms of empowerment of girls. So I think with this backdrop, I think it's very important to see the budget not only in terms of outlay, but also outcome. Now, another very important concern, which globally as well as in India, the debate has been around work participation of women, and now even after the latest PFLS data, it shows 34%, which is also less. Most of the countries, even in South Asia, are ahead of us, except for Pakistan and Afghanistan. While the budget talks about the skilling programs or proportion of market access and support to SHGs, but the skilling program also doesn't say that it what, because we also know that the Skill India or Stand Up India or Startup India, they've hardly benefited women. So I think roadmap is very important. And another very important aspect in the budget is Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana for the urban poor. Now, most of the urban poor, and especially those who are staying in informal settlements, in bastis, they don't own land. So in what way the scheme will be able to fulfill their needs? And there are several other important programs like Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana to deal with the question of hunger, which has been debated. Even our own data from the National Nutrition, this thing, and ICMR data also shows that hunger and malnutrition are the major challenges we are facing. So in this whole context of so many contradictory trends and also very complex unfolding that is happening in the Indian economy in the post-pandemic period, we have these 7 experts who will enlighten us on different aspects of social inclusion. My first question is to Professor Paramita Saha. And can you provide the backdrop of the macroeconomic policy that informs thrust of Union Budget 24-25? And what will be its implications for the northeastern states in general and Tripura, from where you come, in particular? Over to Professor Paramita.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good afternoon to the esteemed chair and panel, distinguished panel here, and all the audience. And my sincere thanks to IMPRI. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You are audible. Yes.
Visible too?
You are audible. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My thanks
yes,
to
you are
IMPRI.
visible also. Yeah.
Thanks to IMPRI and also Madam Professor VIBHUTI Patel for making me part of this discussion. As I'm told, I'm supposed to talk about the background in which the budget is set and social inclusion issues into the budget. I will right away start with sharing my screen. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Actually, the usual anticipation and element of surprise that, accompanies the budget was this time not present because of the interim budget was already presented, which defines the background of this full-fledged budget after the elections and also the economic survey. So if you look into the backdrop, in the interim budget, the finance minister talked about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and Sabka Vishwas, and also talked about social inclusion through coverage of all strata of the society. By all strata of the society, I would like to mean all women, men, poor, and the gender non-binary, the old and infirm, the children, and every group of people. And with geographic inclusion, whether we'd like to see whether the initiatives are covering all the regions of the country or not. And in a major departure from the way we look at the caste and communities so far, the interim budget introduces a new classification of castes into 4 categories like poor, women, youth, and farmer. So these 4 becomes the focal point of the budget. Before going to the budget allocations and all, we can look into briefly the state of the economy. In describing the state of the economy, we are usually the most important summary indicator is the growth of GDP, which the government estimates at the nominal rate of around over 10%. Factoring in for the inflation, we can take it to be 8% in real terms, which is quite satisfactory after the pandemic dip. And after the GDP, the size of the budget is also very important. That is the expenditure, total expenditure that this time is proposed is 48,20,512 crore budget, which is not so big compared to the earlier budget. But one heartening factor is that capital expenditure has gone up. Capital expenditure going up means the capacity and productivity and efficiency of the economy goes up. Public sector spending increases and the infrastructure improves. So this is good for the economy. According with this expenditure, receipts has also increased. I'm not going into the detailed figures because I have very time less. As I'm told, I'm given 8 minutes of time. Another 3 indicators that we are interested in while talking about the state of the economy are the deficits, the fiscal deficits and revenue deficits. Fiscal deficits shows the amount of government borrowing to meet its expenditure. It's contained at 4.9%. Our target is to achieve 4.5, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. Now, question and revenue deficit also, which indicates the gap between revenue expenditure and revenue income. It shows that the expenditure exceeds, when expenditure exceeds than income for purposes which are not very productive. So that is also contained at 1.8%. Inflation, non-food inflation is, government claims that is under control. And there is a trade deficit also going down, and there is a current account surplus. But some problem area remains. One is food inflation, which hits the disadvantaged section of population, entire section of population, but the disadvantaged or the poor very badly. And the budget really gives a very short shrift to the inequality aspects. The different surveys have showed that Indian labor force almost 26% of that earn around 3,000 rupees a month. That makes 100 rupees per day, which is almost doing nothing, not a meaningful employment at all. Then around 18% earns 15,000 a month and 500 rupees a day. That is the amount of inequality and deprivation present in the economy. And also there is a size of the budget is as part of GDP is shrinking, which means those group of population which depends on public outlays and social security expenditures, they are at risk. With this background, we find the economy budget prioritizes 9 priorities they list up. This time there is no Shaptarshi guiding us, but these are plain and straight, plain and simple, which I like. The priorities all very important. Agriculture, after a long neglect, comes up with some futuristic thinking, and we hope it delivers. We'll start with the agriculture part. It is talked about the resilience, climate resilience varieties and raising productivity, which is very important in the context of climate change threats that looms large. The development of seeds and all very technically sound and futuristic, but in this context, we must remember the huge number of small and marginal farmers in our country who do not buy seeds, who would use traditional varieties. Developing climate resilient varieties is all fine, but we have to keep into mind that biotech farms will be boosted, but the farmers' interest will also have to be protected so that these are not hijacked by the corporate capital in the seed farms. Then there is one point very important, that is promotion of natural farming. In this context, I find Northeast is poised to gain very much, because in the Northeast, the tribal farmers, they practice natural farming traditionally. But here, that the 1 crore farmers across the country will be initiated into natural farming. How these will be identified and how these will spread, these are not yet very clear. And also, natural farming is a very laborious, labor-intensive type of a farming. And I expect women will be more engaged in this kind of a farming, and whether these farms to be initiated in natural farming will include women farmers or not, there is no timeline or no figures around that. The next we come to the, most important part of this budget, which has received a lot of attention, the employment and skilling. We all by this time have known the A scheme, A, B, and C scheme of the government, which tries to incentivize the private sector. And in the A scheme, I am not elaborating on the schemes. Only note that it is expected that A scheme is expected to 210 lakh youth, the budget document says, and the MSME job creation scheme expected to benefit 30 lakh of them, and then generate the C scheme is expected to generate 50 lakhs job. There is no explanation as to how these figures has been achieved, and what is the guarantee that the private sector will respond to these incentives. That is also not very clear. It is a bit, I find it a very wishful thinking to be able to generate so much of employment by incentivizing the salaries and the PF EPPO contributions. Then there is about employment and skilling. Here also, there are many, not many, one proposal of improving workforce participation of women through setting up of working women's hostel, and also there is this accommodation of dormitory style for industry workers, industrial workers, but all those in PPP mode, depending on the wish of the private sector. Then there is about educational loans for students. However, easily those loans are offered. I cannot but point out that these are not scholarship. These are not. There is no waiver of fees. There is no stipend. It's again loan. And then there is a talk about internship of workers, internship in the 500 best corporate houses. I'm not sure how corporate houses, whether they will be willing to spend from their CSR for the internship, and whether they have the capacity to train so many of them, so many of the students. Having said that, manufacturing services also, there are a few important programs like internship opportunity that I was just telling. This is also how it will take place over 5 years. That roadmap is not very clear. There are many other priority initiatives in urban development, Awas Yojana and all, and for the urban, in urban areas where people do not have own land, how this Awas Yojana will be beneficial for them. This aspect will have to be looked in, as Professor Patel was talking about. But we are most interested in the social justice and inclusive human resource development part. Here, since there are the gender budget, there are the budget for the SCs, there are the budget for the STs, and there is those programs, public employment programs like MG-NREGA. There is those programs like National Social Assistance Program for the elderly. We need to see all these allocations into all these aspects. So if you look at the social sector allocation, the allocation for both health and education either stagnated or are marginally increased. If I may go into, I will just give you an idea about the fund allocation. Look at this NSAP, it's only marginal increase. In real terms, there is no increase at all. MG-NREGA last financial, it was 60,000 crores, it's 86,000 crores, but don't be, confused. It is not a very great leap because 86,000 crore is still less than the 22 budget. In the 22 budget, it was more than this. So we have not yet, touched upon that allocation. Then PMGSY, Sarak Yojana, Gramin Sarak Yojana, it's stagnating. There is no change. This is Anushutit Janjati Abhuday Yojana, very marginal increase. And this is Banabandhu Kalyan Yojana, little increase there. AMRS, the Equilibrium Model Residential School, a little increase there. There is a talk of engaging a large number of teachers in the Equilibrium schools. These are some of the initiatives for the tribal community. Some are umbrella programs, some are individual programs, but I would request you to look into these figures. This is allocations across all departments for SCs total and STs. This is the actual of 22-23. This is the budget estimate of 22-23, and this is 24-25. All this shows a little increase in the 24-25 budget, but this offers you the most intriguing figure. Allocation of Ministry for Tribal Affairs. The total allocation is slashed. The program for development of scheduled tribe, that also is slashed. The National Tribal Welfare Program under the ministry, that is also is slashed. Then we come to, now we come to the, these are another specific schemes for STs. This PVTG, the particularly vulnerable tribal group, you see the kind of slash here. 256 crores is on 20 crore. This has impact on an entire Northeast. And these are the I do not have the consolidated figure for the earlier budget estimate. This time only they have shown these consolidated figures. And finally, about the Northeast, as I was telling, the Northeast allocation to Northeast across all ministries is around 10 lakh 893 crore, which is 9.9% increase over last year revised estimates. Ministry of Donor gets 5,900 crore, which is slightly higher than 2023 revised estimates. The two schemes that I have located in the budget is about the infrastructure in flood mitigation project in Assam and the Northeast Special Infra Development Schemes, and few small schemes are also there. But I would have liked some scheme under the infrastructure for tourism in Northeast. And possibilities in future, we can say, I forgot to mention here one, I'm telling, the natural, in the agriculture, since natural farming is being, encouraged, and this might be very useful for the Northeast. And the exotic fruit variety is now being grown in Northeast in a large extent that may be more popularized. Floriculture is one area where Northeast can do very well. Then the English-speaking educated youth in Northeast is a resource for hospitality and tourism industry. In training and capacity building, this factor may be thought about. And also, Northeast cuisine needs some branding and advertisement, because Northeast cuisine beverages simple, healthy, and sustainable. We go gaga about Japanese sushi, but we also have this kind of variety here. We have the sticky rice in all the Northeastern states, and very delectable, which is not known outside. And then in Manipur, we have the brown rice. So all these things, maybe, if wanted, maybe done put to good use. And also the handloom of Northeast have not, beyond the Assam silk, others has not been so much advertised or so much known. The handloom of Manipur is also very good. And other tribal weaves are exceptionally beautiful, needs showcasing and building up. I think with this, I can end.
Yeah.
And I hope I was within my time.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Paramita Shah, for providing such an important overview and such a focused discussion in a crisp manner, and also bringing in the concerns of 7 sisters of Northeast. Now I turn to our friend from South, Dr. Manimekalai, whose specialization has been in the informal sector. She has done several primary data-based researches over last 40 years. And Manimekalai, I would like you to focus on declining work participation of women, and also condition of informal sector, which amounts to 90% according to ILO, and for women's in informal sector, 94%. Yeah, over to Dr. Manimekalai. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor VIBHUTI. I was a bit late. I was struggling to connect.
Yeah.
But I could listen to Professor Paramita, and most of the issues with the statistics also were mentioned. So I'll rather go for the kind of trends, that is how the entire budget allocation to different sectors render this social exclusion or inclusion. So the persisting issues as far as the Indian economy is concerned is the present, the neoliberal context, of course, since 1990, the widening inequality and including gender inequality, where the issues of poverty, unemployment, inflation, etc., definitely has an impact. And the impact is more with the poor and the other marginalized communities. So given this, what kind of expectation would be there? It is prime, I mean, the priority should be to eliminate or at least address these issues. And in the labor market, the question of contract labor or informal labor, the increasing informalization there in the formal sector, it's one of the issues. And it could be witnessed in my own studies and also the studies done by CWDS, by other colleagues also, how they are being the recruiters, whether it is women or men, who are recruited as apprentices or trainees, are treated as workers only. I could hear from the persons who were drawn from ITIs or from the diploma, polytechnic, etc. Also in the technical institutions are being treated as, I mean, enrolled as apprentices, but they are directly given work to, they are not given training, and but not in terms of payment, they are only treated as. So these kind of issues are there, and the government is trying to formalize this apprentices, internships, etc. And sufficient allocation has also been made in this budget to emphasize that youth employment is the priority, etc. But the reality, when you go and inquire, conduct investigation there in the labor market, in the formal sector also, in the huge factories in the export processing zones, or I extensively work with this garment sector and also these technical institutions where the students are being placed. So the contract system, and also to the current study which I've been taking is the sanitation workers, where 90% are contract workers. So it is in the government, but government itself is not going for the permanent employment or recruitment. So in this context, what is the question of social security? In this, we are discussing the social sector and the social inclusion aspects that is to be covered in this budget, because when the budget is allocated only, there will be at least some kind of climb over such expenses, or the budget to be allocated from each ministries and then departments and to various other states also. And this is one aspect where the social security is very much a question as increasingly the informal. It is not the recent phenomenon. It has been taking place for a long, since the neoliberal policies have been introduced in 1991 onwards. But this is the peak in the contract system or any other system, casual labor system, where you are denied with any other benefits which otherwise the permanent employees will be keeping. And the second important aspect is about the corporatization of education, health, and social sector. That is seeing the social sector also in a market perspectives. So privatization of education has rendered expansion of education, no doubt in it, but it has also brought other issues. So what is the budget allocation taking place? That I'll be talking about the second important aspect, education, health, and social sector. And of course, what is the implication of this reduction or maintaining the status quo in allocation of budget for these? And there has been another important expectation is that, of course, the entire issues to be prioritized include employment, social security, food security, education, health, etc. And accordingly, the budget should be. But the capital expenditure that is being emphasized both in this budget and also in the earlier budgets, even in the interim budget, it is actually expected that those expenditures should bring some income, and that income will go, or returns, whatever, that returns will be redistributed and transferred to or trickle down to the so-called the poor or the marginalized or socially excluded population. But unfortunately, that is not happening is one issue. So accordingly, we have to really question as to, or claim whether this increase in capital expenditure or even reduction in corporate taxes, etc., or I mean, trying to inform what kind of trend that it is going to be in future. Though at least in the earlier context, in the earlier 2 through 3 budget was emphasized that the public infrastructure investment, the digitization of public service delivery, the targeted relief and structural programs under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan was emphasized, and also the government claimed that it is now the bottom-up approach where consumer-driven demand growth, taking into account the inflation and increasing cost of living will be. But unfortunately, that is not taking place because inflation and increasing cost of living is really pinching the poor, and the poor who are supposed to be supported in terms of education, health, food security, particularly the PDS system. There is a kind of dismantling, diverting to that is happening. I'll come back to that also while discussing that. So, given that we are trying towards Viksit Bharat to 2047 and the sustainable development, etc., the gender inequality also in the World Economic Forum is bringing the gender inequality report also, where we are, it's a kind of a fluctuation. One side we are increasing in certain indicators and other it is not. So it is inequality sustains, that is gender inequality also. So then the focus should be on women, men, and transgender wherever it is required, because the women are not homogeneous or people are not homogeneous. So whether it is poverty-ridden households are to be prioritized, or the working class to be prioritized, etc. Accordingly, the budget allocations to be made. And it is also need to be focusing on workforce participation and employability gaps, because since the economic reforms policy, there has been a kind of declining quality of education or employability in question, thanks to privatization of education, where degrees are being produced, but whether the degree holders are being marketable and employable, that is a question. So what is the kind of arrangement this in the policies, either in the policies or in the budget allocations, to fill those gaps? We are talking about skill and entrepreneurship development, those that are available, but in the schemes to fill the employability gaps in the very inbuilt in the system is missing, and that doesn't have any much emphasis in this budget also in terms of allocation of the budget. And productive employment generation is one, at the same time decent working conditions. See the whether it is garment sector or the construction sector or the sanitation sector, where I have been associated and working with also, and in the technical institutions, technical factories, etc. The amount of work that the contractor assigned to a person is endless, that they have to deliver these, and there is no gap, and 8 hours of work shift is there, and they will be asked to do additional, but they will be paying. But even 8 hours, performing 8 hours itself is a question, because work dumping more and more, expecting piece, some 100 piece, 200 piece, and kind of work it's to be delivered. So that is really pinching their health also. So decent working conditions and providing facilities on the one hand is missing, and work pressure on the other hand, ultimately questioning the labor rights. And so protecting the livelihoods and increasing the income levels and economic welfare, keeping that intact is all the questions. So given this background, what is this budget is talking about? I was talking about social sector. So social sector, on the one hand, whatever the kind of provisions which Professor Paramita also emphasized, and the social security, and particularly the labor class, and the poverty-ridden households, the hunger households, and the other marginalized communities, the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and minorities, the women, rural, all these are to be in the kind of, that is to some extent appreciate this budget for focusing on certain context, particularly this Nari Shakti, the Mission Shakti. There has been some kind of programs, and of course even providing huts to street vendors to take care of their interest, etc. there. But is at the expense, all these have happened at the expense of reducing some allocations already in other heads. When I come to gender budget component also, that I'll explain. So education, of course, gets 12% of the gender budget. In terms of gender budget, I'm talking. And you know that there has been dropout in the primary and secondary education also. So how to accommodate that this budget? Of course, there are schemes under SSA and other things, but still there are dropouts. So we are talking about universalization of education, but particularly girls are being dropped for various social reasons, institutional reasons, and how to address those. And that is to be connected with the budget, and that is missing. And there is only a nominal or a marginal increase in the education also. And particularly for education, higher education, it is only 3,000 crore increase between the budget estimated and revised, and the cut in public spending on education, where we are talking about 6% of GDP over how many years we have been telling that education should be the priority. That will only bring the base, but still education budget has been declining over these years, and that cannot. Like our own neighboring developing economies are really performing better in terms of education, and you compare this gender inequality report also, you will arrive at the fact that all those countries are performing better than India, because of the fact that right from the beginning they provided a base in terms of investing on education. That is, I don't know how health and education should be the priority, and that has been receiving the minimum budget allocations, and that is the persisting issue, not just this year. And but rather they have been in emphasis on digitization of education, internships, apprentices, etc. And all these, whatever I have mentioned, digitization, internship, etc., are with the corporates, and corporates are going to implement those things, and how it will be reaching the deserved, the people in the very remote rural areas, whether they'll be also connected with the digitization. We know we had that experience during pandemic, how digital divide emerged, and that too there were dropouts from the very lower income groups and remote areas, and particularly it had implications on girls' education. So in the gender context also, it is very much an important aspect to be. And if we go there to our Tirupur here in Tamil Nadu, to garment and textile units, we will find a lot of hostels private hostels are being given to government, and the students who are going there are recruited as interns or apprentices, and they are employed there. And after the training, where the training stipend is also given, but there is no guarantee whether they continue or not. Even if they continue, and they will be enrolled there itself as employed, but they may not sustain. That is the question, and that doesn't come to the report of the government records at all, because the joining, the statistics you will provide, you will get, will be joining, telling that these people have undergone internship or apprentices training, and they have got enrolled under Deen Dayal scheme, etc. But unfortunately, there have been dropouts immediately within a month or next month. That is not accounted for. That is a major issue which emerged in the recent study which CWD is conducted for UNESCO. And apart from those things, some of the monetary provisions in terms of education, loans or scholarships, particularly to the marginalized sections or the poor households, have also remains stagnant, and there is no much improvement in this budget also. And particularly when such provisions which were otherwise available are now stopped, then it will have implications particularly to the poor, and in the poor households it will have implications on girls, because the priority of the girls in the rural poor households is not the girls. And even for boys also, they will rather say that it is not necessary, and that is why you now introduce the scheme of Vishwakarma, where the rural artisans or the other artisans communities will be, who are not able to continue their education, will be given a lump sum loan to establish themselves in the industry. It is, of course, it has its own implications of how you are reinforcing that a particular community engaged in certain kind of work should get sustain themselves in that particular, not to distribute to other occupations. Then allocation of budget, ACST budget also, there is a policy that you have to allocate certain 1974-79 onwards it is available, but in this budget we hardly had 3.43 and 2.974 respectively of ACST as per this policy, which is the due supposed to be going. So what is happening to the rest of the amount, that itself is a major question. And there are a lot of expectation from the Dalit and Adivasi for the livelihood to be protected, and that question is is to be understood how the kind of a budget allocated will be capturing that. And as far as the health is concerned, there are other things also in the education, but due to want of time, I'm moving to the other, and we will have a scope there in the discussion. So there in the health sector, of course, as per the NSS 73rd round, it was informed that out-of-pocket expenditure has been on the increase, and there is always a gap between public and private expenses, and who will approach the private or the public, and the services which are not suiting to the timings of these working class or the poor in the public health services also made them to kind of go to the private doctors, and that all contributed to their out-of-pocket expenses. And there is hardly any attempt to protect to provide them or cover them or suiting the public health services to be available to their timing. Of course, the emergency, that all those things are different. And so there is only 1,500 crore, that is 1.81% of the health budget it could be found in this budget. And even two important areas where Section Angawadi and abortion schemes received only hardly a 5% of the gender budget of this current 2025. And there has been emphasis on the health insurance and digital health services. But again, the reality is that the health insurance schemes do not reach the poor, except certain areas where there has been a kind of full propaganda. Or when you go to the hospital themselves have the provision to inform the patients that the scheme is available, you can avail. And Tamil Nadu, there are schemes for the chronic diseases or fatal diseases also. And when you go to the hospital, that particular hospital which is linked with that scheme will definitely inform that this scheme is there, so you can avail that. Otherwise, this the bottom of the pyramid of this economic scale, whether it is the rural working class women or the other communities, SCSTs, they are hardly informed about the health insurance. So that is one of the issues. And accordingly, whenever we are talking about allocating the health insurance or digital health services, which is very much emphasized in this budget also, should allocate funding for creating awareness to the deserved and non-reaching. Otherwise, they are not reachable. They are not able to get information about these. It is not the TV alone. There must be other IEC materials or periodical propaganda, which is very much missing. And it can be connected. For example, we have MNRGA, so there the health insurance sessions could be provided so that they will come. And even those communications must be in their language, in their local language, which they will be able to absorb proper. Yeah. And about the expansion of the health facilities and filling up of the vacancies as far as the health sector allocation is concerned, is very silent over that. And MNRGA, we have been saying that there is a need to expansion. And of course, the last budget, at least they have allocated like 90,000. And now this has come down and there is a minus 4,000 crore, as it is only 86,000 crore. As far as the revised estimate is concerned. And therefore, this is a big question, because MNRGA, since particularly after this pandemic, more and more demand is coming, and therefore it is necessary to bring into the envelope of MNRGA, but it is not happening. And at least the budget allocation should have been higher to compensate for, but that is also not covered. And of course, the major issue is about the food subsidy. Some of the issues with the PDS to be mentioned here. And there has been only a small increase for this portion scheme, also midday meal scheme, because that is really, of course, Tamil Nadu is in the forefront right from 90s to provide midday meal scheme. Thanks to Government of India that it has taken, but still there has been a small increase. Given that on the one hand we have to address the issues of dropout and also increase the enrollment, etc., and retain them in both primary and secondary or middle and secondary education, this portion scheme is really helping, and that is not much increase could be seen.
Thank you, Professor Manimekalai. You have given such a comprehensive view of all the aspects of labor processes, labor relations, labor rights in the area of the workforce situation, also the education budget. And you are right, though the National Education Policy 2020 recommended 6% of GDP, but it hardly comes to 2.8%. Health, you have correctly told that it's only 1.8% of GDP, which is abysmally low. And your data from NSS 77th round, and also condition of the artisans, the question of the mind-boggling issue of digitization, and the most important aspect of slashing of budget of SC and ST, that is, and even post-matric scholarship. I think these are very important takeaways. I think we will discuss them further in the discussion session. And now I come to Dr. Aditi Kapoor, who is also who will focus on climate issues and also the current scenario of the agrarian sector with regards to and her critical reflection on the current budget. So Dr. Aditi Kapoor, to what extent allocation of measures towards climate change resilience and mitigation of climate calamity are addressed in the current budget? And what is your response to Drone Didi scheme in agriculture, where the 500 crores are provided to support 15,000 selected SHGs in the current year and the next year, giving these services on rental basis?
Thank you so much for having me here. I would like to begin by thanking IMPRI and especially Professor VIBHUTI Patel for asking me to share my thoughts on climate resilience. I think climate resilience really affects health and labor a lot, especially the informal labor. So it's extremely important to really talk about it. When I tell people, do you want me to talk in English or Hindi-English mixed?
English.
Okay.
We have participants from Northeast, Bengal, and 7 southern states.
Okay. Whenever I tell people I work on climate change, people are like, pollution too much pollution. So what can we do about it? So I'd like to really begin on that because, we are an urbanizing country and we are not paying enough attention to it. I mean, in this particular budget, for instance, there's been an increase of 1.3%, which is neither here nor there. And, the total increase comes to about 11.5 crore. But considering the number of not just the new towns which are coming up, because most of the growth is happening in, the B and the C categories of towns, but even in the mega towns and even in metropolitan cities, pollution is something that the leadership has not been able to control. So I think really when we're looking at productivity and resilience, which is what all this budget is about, pollution should not have been given the short shrift that it has been given. And I'm not only talking about air pollution, I'm also talking about water pollution and noise pollution, because all of this really does affect productivity and resilience, especially of people who are exposed to it day in and day out due to the kind of work they do. So the small street vendors, the construction workers, the cyclists, the rickshaw pullers, even the auto rickshaw pullers. So I think even slum dwellers and traffic police. So, these are people who are really affected, and especially those who live in low income, narrow lane, concrete colonies, including those which are called urban villages. And indoor cooking really makes it worse in terms of the pollution for women. And you see that in slums, a lot of women either cook inside their house or just outside. And, having the LPG has not helped, because every time you use the LPG, you need to put off the fan. So, really speaking, I think pollution is something that the budget has missed when it's such a big problem for us. I know that the CPCB budget, the Pollution Control Commission for Pollution Control budget has increased by about 6.5%. But I'm not too sure, which is what 113 crores, but I don't know whether it's to go for new equipment. I don't think it's going to go towards more mitigation. So I think pollution is something I would really like to, talk about. Disasters, when we're looking at climate resilience, much of our agriculture work, many of our cities, people who, are really, again, working, are low-income groups, socially, belong to lower classes or lower castes. they are the ones who get more affected by floods. So whether in rural or urban areas. So it's floods, droughts, and cyclones. And really speaking, very little has been done on climate resilience here. There's been some money which has been going, but in this budget, for instance, they say Bihar, Assam, Himachal, Uttarakhand, and Sikkim will get some money for infrastructure. Infrastructure is not really the kind of flood relief that we're looking at. Women, for instance, are completely left out of response, relief, and preparatory work. There's hardly, even though now, I think it was in 2016 that the Prime Minister had mandated the what are called the DDMPs, the district development disaster plans, but they have not really taken off. So I think that's an area that's been completely missed by the budget. So, when we're looking at productivity and resilience, we're not looking at things that are going to detract from achieving our sustainable development goals, right? So productivity and resilience will take us to SDGs, but these will detract. So, that again, drought. So I know there's been some money on drinking water and on solid waste management. But I'll come to the natural farming and the oil seeds, which are also grown in arid areas. But 25% of our area is undergoing desertification. So I think much more needs to be done in terms of, drought mitigation. And coastal, just last that I'd like to speak about is coastal, the mangroves. There's been a 6.7% increase in the National Coastal Mission, which doesn't give us a clear idea as to what is the share of the Mangrove Institute for Shoreline Habitats and Tangible Incomes is going to be, because this is the institute which was set up last year, which is supposed to focus on community income generation from coastal areas, right? From mangrove incomes. So we don't know how much of it from this coastal mission will go into seawalls and infrastructure. If it's 6.7 crores, my hunch is that a lot of it is going to be infrastructure development. So, even if you do have that in the coastal mission, we're not sure what's going to happen in the mangroves, because that's what really affects the poor fisher folk, and it affects their health. We've already had Professor Saha talk about health, and I think that is something that we really need to look at. So now coming to, coastal, just one more thing that I'd like to just say is that, in coastal, unfortunately, what has happened is that a lot of this poorer coastal money that's going to go to the coast, we're not sure which states it will go to. Because Kerala, for instance, Tamil Nadu, for instance, these are really affected. So let's see what happens. But that again is something that I wanted to see much more in the budget. If you're looking at productivity and resilience, because much of our GDP comes from the informal sector, from the small producers, from the fisher folk. It doesn't come from the corporate sector. So, where are we really looking? Also, in terms of the National Green India Mission, for instance, there's been an increase of 42.4%, but we know that it's a lot of afforestation that happens over there. It doesn't necessarily rejuvenate the ecosystem, which has been the kind of struggle against the Green India mission. So again, an increase because we do have a net zero target for 2070. So we do need sequestration. So, let's see kind of what happens over there. There is no information to go by, no data to go by as to how much of this Green India mission has led to increasing income for the communities who live around forests, for the forest communities. We know from a study that was done by Ashoka University in 2023 that 47%, which is almost half of the rural households, are still using firewood. And I think about in urban areas, it's about 6.5% who still use firewood. The rest of them have shifted to LPG. But then firewood is not the only thing that people use from forests. And we don't have any data on non-timber forest produce, for instance, on which much of the forest community depends. So I think these are kind of very big gaps that I wanted to point out in the union budget. Let's look at the greening of the economy. So before I come to agriculture, I'd like to talk about the rooftop solar investment, which is great, I think. The PM Awas Yojana does talk about female ownership of houses, women owners, but I think it would have been good if maybe they might still do it. they should do it if we can give them recommendations, that rooftop solar investments should really give a heavy discount or a discounted kind of subsidy to women-owned houses and those which are in joint names in urban areas. I think that's something that would really help. Just very quickly before I come to agriculture, on climate finance taxonomy, which is very good because, there's apparently a potential for $3.1 trillion in climate investment, for India from 2018 to 2030. So, I mean, whatever it is, we do need a lot of money. But electric vehicles, for instance, are going to form a bulk of this, which is fine. Electric vehicles are good. Not sure whether batteries are good in the long run for the environment. They are not. But still, point is that now, for instance, in e-rickshaws, we do see a lot of women drivers. So if all this can be, more oriented towards getting women in as owners of this, as, technically skilled on this, I think that's a potential that we really need to be looking at. There is a rural energy, renewable energy for livelihoods scheme, which has been picked up by the Ministry for Renewable Energy, for new and renewable energy, but it's still just a scheme. But, our hope is that something of this will actually, we'll see it over there. So just coming to agriculture, let me begin by saying that the boost to oilseeds and pulses is very good for the climate, for resilience. But 87% of our pulses and 72% of our oilseeds are grown in drought rain-fed areas by small and marginal farmers. And many of these farmers use seeds that they save at home and are their own varieties. Whether this will see the expansion through FPOs, the farmer producer companies, where women are not there and there are no targets for women to be there, whether these will be, this expansion will be seen through private public investment, there again, social inclusion and gender inclusion will be probably, not addressed. So I think those are things that we as, practitioners and researchers and advocates really need to push for. So I think that's very good, because definitely these are areas that are very promising, but, what do we do? In terms of, again, the same thing applies to the 109, high yield and climate resilient varieties. Because, for instance, one of the problems in Sundarbans has been that the high yielding variety of paddy does not give women fodder. And so, the poorer women have not wanted to grow that, because the shorter dwarf varieties, they grow, they can stay under saline water for a long time and they still give them paddy and fodder, at least for their household. So, so those are things that we need to see. But of course, we need to be moving in that direction. But how we move is the question. Coming to natural farming, I'm actually really happy to have a mission on natural farming. Professor VIBHUTI Patel knows that, my whole
your PhD thesis.
Whole doctoral research has been on organic farming. So I'm very passionate about, non-pesticide, like non-chemical farming, and convinced that it can feed households if we only shift the metrics. But still, I would say it's been given 459 crore budget. But, like I have argued earlier, the problem with natural farming, and it's interesting they call it natural farming, which means it's not only organic, even though India has the world's maximum number of organic farmers, and the land under organic farming has really grown over the last 10 years. But the natural farming includes a whole lot of other kind of farming. But, as was mentioned earlier, much of the work is done by women. So the question is that now, as we see the natural farming coming into being, there's a lot of emphasis on productivity, certification, and marketing, and not enough on skill building, on labor-saving devices, on workload, mitigation. And these are the areas which affect women more. So, as we expand on natural farming, I think this is like a golden opportunity where we can really see that, of course, women are going to be doing the land. 63% of all women work in rural areas. the acceleration of women labor has, female labor participation
But
in
what about Kisan card?
the Kisan card, unfortunately, on paper can belong to the tiller, but in real life, it belongs to the owner. So we have a lot of absentee farmers or, people who go out seasonally, and the Kisan card belongs to them. So Kisan card and SAGs, for instance, have not converged yet. But SAGs, if they are, and I mean, SAGs are great, but I personally have a problem with SAGs because SAGs don't have any decision-making power. SAGs are told कि ये करना है आपको, so then they do it. So it's a very top-down decision-making thing that happens. They have no control over the panchayats. I mean, Andhra, for instance, proudly says we have the largest, Telangana and Andhra earlier, now they're divided, that we have the largest number of SAGs. You go to the field and they have nothing to do with panchayats or with local development planning, which is what the PM insisted on yesterday in his Niti Aayog meeting, that you have to have locally developed plans. So, the decision making, the women's empowerment and things like that, that is something that we really need to be looking at. Lastly, coming to the drone Didis, again, a very promising scheme, to fly, to rent, to repair drones via their SAGs, the potential for self-entrepreneurship, saving labor, saving time, part of being the new AI and digital world is great. And the only, kind of questions is, SAGs, we all know, don't function very well in every state. The kind of boost that SAGs need doesn't happen automatically. The departments that run it are not interested in it because the NRLM then works with other departments, right? Other livelihood departments, be it agriculture or fisheries or whatever, right? The Department of Fisheries, the Department of Agriculture are not very keen, they don't have the wherewithal for that software, right? They are hardware people. The extension services are not shaped so as to give boost to these SAGs, not yet. It's a lot of investment is still needed. And then, of course, so the thing is that, and then the other thing is that, they're also renting, right? So they may just become rentals, so all the men, etc., do it, and the SAG rents it. How much of it will really come down to individual women, members of that SAG? How much would it really empower the SAG or her? I think that is where I have some recommendations. Maybe I'll come to it later. But there are ways in which we can do that, but definitely we are not there still. So very promising again, but a lot of, in the how, we still need to work a lot on that. I'll stop.
Thank you, Dr. Aditi Kapoor, for giving such a crucial insights on this very important issue about which whole world is now worried. Now, I think I come to Dr. Aditi Sawant. Again, she is the person who has worked extensively and traveled extensively in rural Maharashtra, and several of her thesis researches, as well as her lobbying is for the farm sector. I would like to know your views on the current budget and to what extent the strategies to enhance effectiveness of these funds can be ensured by the measures that we take. Yeah. Dr. Aditi Sawant, yes. Are you able to? Oh, you are freezed. Hello? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Yes.
Thank you, VIBHUTI ma'am, and thank you, IMPRI, for giving me this opportunity. So, budget is a financial statement of the government which reflects its priority of sectors in the process of economic development. Although India is in the top 5 countries in terms of GDP, unlike other developed countries, more than 17% of contribution to GDP comes only from agriculture sector in India, which itself reflects the dominance of this sector in terms of consumption as well as employment. However, there is a complete mismatch between the GDP contribution of agriculture and allied activities and its share in the budget allocation. Unfortunately, agriculture and rural development sector comes as a last priority as per the government and bureaucratic understanding. Agriculture gets hardly 3% of the budget allocation, despite its very strong backward and forward linkage to the crucial industries in the society, in the economy. Hence, what do farmers want and what does government want to give? This question needs deep introspection into our agriculture policies. In today's presentation, I will confine myself to three major areas. Firstly, women participation and empowerment in agriculture sector. Secondly, social inclusion and technology penetration in agriculture. And thirdly, the budget allocation for research and development, which is a part of green box subsidy as per the WTO terminology. To address my first concern of gender balance and women empowerment, I would like to throw light upon certain facts which were revealed during my primary data collection in Maharashtra and other adjacent states. It is found that hardly 5% of the women in village participate in the major or minor economic and financial decisions of the household. As per the recent report published by the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare, the number of women cultivators and workers are significantly less than their male counterparts. This clearly shows and this throws light on poor land ownership of women in agriculture and rural regions. Government of India is working on transferring the immovable property rights in the name of women of the house. Schemes such as Prime Minister Awas Yojana promotes and privatizes women ownership in immovable property. But in many states of India, land or immovable property ownership of women is a very big question mark. Also, another issue of concern that correct number of women agriculture workers are not reflected in the government official records. Schemes like Lakpati Didi for women self-help groups need actual assessment in terms of pre and post analysis of the scheme. Many of the women self-help groups are engaged in non-agriculture activities such as sewing or stitching, pickle, papad or masala making or candle or rug making activities, which are highly substandard in nature and do not help these women in the long run to grow professionally. The announcement of Drone Didi scheme is very important announcement for women farmers, and it seems to be beneficial to the women farmers if implemented properly. My second concern is social inclusion and technology penetration in rural India. For social inclusion, especially post-lockdown period, use of digital devices such as mobile phones and apps have become important part of inclusive agriculture. However, as per my recent primary data survey, it is very clear that around 50 to 70% of the farmers have smartphones, but they hardly use these smartphones or internet services for agriculture-related information. The apps they use give information primarily on weather forecast with very poor accuracy. On the contrary, farmers need information on the current retail local market prices, which are not available. They also want financial assistance for attaining training programs on marketing, e-marketing, packaging, and export. However, such skill development programs at village level are yet not available, and there is a lot of ambiguity in the funds sanction. We have recently published a book on revolutionizing farming, nexus between education and technology. And one of our authors mentioned that there is so much of pressure on the government agriculture extension services departments. There is not enough manpower available, no adequate infrastructure available. Then how do we expect even these agriculture extension officers to reach out to these villages to impart such training programs? And my third and last concern is domestic subsidy given by the government in the form of green box subsidy and amber box subsidy, which is a part of budget allocation. It is very clear that Indian government spends more on food security allocation as part of green subsidy. While there are not much or many funds available for real market data collection and market analysis, economic and social infrastructure building of the agriculture sector, in this budget, Government of India allocated funds for 109 high-yielding and climate-resilient variety of crops, some custom duty relief on shrimp and other fish varieties from 10% to 5% or even 0%, establishment of 10,000 need-based bio-input resource centers as digital public infrastructure, digital crop surveys to be undertaken in 400 districts, and 1 crore farmers to be initiated into natural farming. However, announcement of such sporadic schemes are not going to give any concrete permanent solution to the downgrading agriculture sector. On the contrary, Government of India should have invested in the concept of farmer schools up to 12th standard, primarily imparting professional and vocational training of smart agriculture. Although it is mentioned in the new education policy that agriculture will be added as a vocational course from 9th standard onwards, the coursework is designed by NCERT. There is not much implementation of this policy. Hence, I conclude, I find that this budget more as a bandage budget rather than a fundamentally troubleshooter budget for agriculture sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aditi Sawant, for calling it a bandage budget, not a problem shooter budget. And I think some of the very important concerns about farmers' entitlements you have brought in. And I think I'm sure it is you are also very much influenced by the farmer suicide and the crisis, agrarian volatility of agricultural prices, and even the water crisis, the small irrigation and all. I think these are very important concerns. And you also talked about the gender disaggregated data that is required, because there is hardly anything available about the cultivators, tillers, and the nominal landowners. So very important concerns. Now I come to Mr. Sailesh Mishra, the most neglected area in the budget, which is about the senior citizens. And I would like to spell your charter of demand and also your critique of the budget. I'm sure senior citizens are quite upset that budget has not given due coverage and due importance to their concerns. Over to Mr. Shri.
Thank you, VIBHUTI ma'am. Thank you, IMPRI, for giving the opportunity. And thank for including senior citizen issues in your deliberation. I think this is very important. First of all, I would like to start with the quote, very important quote. It's called, "Aging is not lost youth, but a new stage of opportunity and strength." But I wonder, is it true? Because we have forgotten. It is in this budget 2024-25, did we intentionally forget the word senior citizen from the budget? It is very shocking and surprising that how in Viksit Bharat, 149 million senior citizens don't have any place. Is this country not for old people? According to recently released Government Economic Survey 2024, it is strongly mentioned that there is urgent need for structured elder care policy in India. In fact, Niti Aayog report 2023 on aged care also highlighted the need to address issue of aging population in the area of healthcare, social engagement, financial stability, security, and digital well-being. But the finance minister, who is 65 years of age, and in the parliament, when there are 200 MPs who are senior citizens did not find word to acknowledge our old people. The elders have spent their whole life taking care of the family, struggle for work. They paid their taxes. They helped the country, the community, and the development. They retired working for the community and the nation. The nation conveniently forget them, give them their silver dividend. Our seniors require a silver dividend. Their right to healthcare, security, independence, and financial stability is important. Do you know that Department of Social Justice and Empowerment, which is our nodal ministry, MSJE, has been allocated around 13,500 crore in this budget, but only 279 crore is allotted to aging. That is only 2% of the budget. Just imagine the 10% of the population of this country get the 2% of the budget. So we, as the senior citizen group, and we have the Joint Action Committee working all over India of senior citizen organization, we had mentioned to political parties and the government. We have been fighting for this since 1999. There is a strong demand, which is according to current issues also. What demand was restoration of senior citizen railway concession, which was withdrawn during the pandemic. I hope you all remember. Railways are used by poor and middle class people. Rich fly, old people don't fly. They stay on the road or on the railways. So it has been withdrawn. It's a basic right to have mobility, and you have taken that back. Then we asked for withdrawal of 18% GST. This government believes that old people should be looked after by the family. I agree, but you are snatching that right. You are pressuring them. You are punishing them by 18% GST. If I want to have an with a nurse or maid, or if I want to admit my old parent to I have to pay 18% GST. Then the other demand was that we demanded inclusion of 60 plus old people in Ayushman Bharat scheme. It's a wonderful scheme. Why we have not been included, irrespective of the class and income we have, because we have right to free access to quality health. Then 90% of old people don't have any income, they don't have any social security. So why we are not giving pension to old people? It's only 200 rupees. How can you for 2 days, 1 day is 200 rupees? You are asking 50 days. We demanding 3,000 rupees to old people who don't pay taxes. See, this is what we wanted, because 90% of people don't pay taxes. There is a need for a program, action plan. VIBHUTI ma'am, I think this is for you. Homeless people, homeless old people, also childless couple for their shelter, food, financial security, and health. People who are childless and homeless, they don't have anything to take care. The government is not able to take care. We should make a plan for the shelter, food, financial security. What problem is we have a policy of senior citizens in 1999. It's not implemented. It's a document. It's a forgotten in some files. Students don't know. Babu
Mr.
don't know.
Sailesh Mishra, your audio is poor. There is a loose connection?
Okay,
Your voice
okay.
is cracking. Now it is fine. Now it is fine.
Okay, sorry. So there is a need for national policy which has been held up for 1999, and I think if the policy is not there, nobody is going to implement it. There is urgent need for dementia policy, national dementia policy. 10% of old people suffer from some health issues, mental health issues, and 10% is a big population of 149 million people who suffer some form of dementia. So there is no plan. Government doesn't know what is dementia. They don't have any program for dementia care. Maintenance and Welfare Act, the bill passed in 2007, we gave some input, and government also, that was a good discussion we had. But this bill is pending in Parliament, amendment of the Act in 2019. Why government is sleeping on it? Senior citizens need security, they need maintenance, they need safety, they need elder care provision. All is mentioned in this Act, and it's still pending in the Parliament 2019. And none of the MPs take care to raise the voice. And the government and this manifesto of political party talked about elder-friendly infrastructure. So it is not mentioned in the budget. Senior citizen public infrastructure, age-friendly. We need transport system to facilitate mobility and independence of old people. It is not mentioned. The word itself has been, invisible. And there are a lot of announcements. Every year, government announces some very good, names. And for so many years, it has been happening. I'll mention some of them. We want to know what happened to Senior Citizen Welfare Fund Act 2015, where it was said all the money lying in the government, in bank account, insurance, and other places. So what happened to Senior Citizen Welfare Fund? Where is the fund and who is using it? What happened to National Center for Aging? Government did a big announcement that we are starting a National Research Center for Aging. Where is it? Who's operating it? Then National Program for Healthcare of Elderly, NPHCE, is a very good program. Actually, it has to be there in every district. Nobody knows what about it. Then government started employment opportunity for old people. Who's employed? Where are the employed people? So there are so many such things. Government does fancy names and announcement, and they forget in the budget and they no mention. And last 2-3 years ago, they started national helpline for senior citizens. It's called 14567. 5-digit number 14567. It is not working in many states because the funding has stopped. There were field supervisors who were there on the field who used to have referral, who used to coordinate with police and different agencies. But because of no funding, it has stopped. What we want to mention, what is happening in this country? Are we going to forget our old people and just move ahead? Remember, we at present have 65 to 70% young population. We all are going to grow old. Also, we 65% population lives in the rural area. What happens to old people in the rural area? 53% of the old population are female. Where is the feminization program for old people? Where is the action plan? There's so many questions we have. We are tired. We don't have voice. We can't come out and give morchas and do fast. We can't have rallies. We have been tired asking for meetings, but ministers don't take care. MPs and candidates will come and ask the votes. But they don't understand we are the 35% voting population of this country. But we are not taking care. It's very sad and shocked. I will come to the way forward also. It's not just criticizing government is not doing anything, but we'll have way forward what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Mr. Sailesh Mishra, for making such a passionate plea on behalf of the Senior Citizens Associations. And now in Bombay alone, we have more than 70 Senior Citizens Associations. So I can understand in all over the country, we must be having hundreds of them, and you have voiced their concern for the financial allocation, and whatever promises are made for the senior citizens, they need to be and they must be translated into budgetary commitments. And now I come to Dr. Neha Shah, who the one very important announcement made in the budget is about the support to the women entrepreneurs. I would like to know that, and you have worked in this area for a long time. So does the budget respond to human development needs of at a subnational level? You are from Gujarat, and we have so many states and union territories with so much of socio-economic educational inequalities. And what do you have to say about the schemes to support women entrepreneurs and startups? Will this scheme also support transgender persons who want to start enterprise? Do you support demand for the quota for SC, ST, women and trans persons in the flagship schemes such as Stand Up India, Make in India and Startup India? Hello, Dr. Lee.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Can I share screen? Do I have the
Yes.
right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, Professor VIBHUTI Patel and IMPRI for giving me this opportunity to share my concerns. Actually, my presentation is mainly on some social concerns, as that was lastly communicated, and not on women entrepreneur, because I thought that is going to be my focus.
Okay.
So I have focused on social concerns.
Yes, very important. Yeah,
that emerges. But of course, like since you have raised some questions, I may respond to that at the end about the women entrepreneurs. So before I start talking about what are the provisions, how I have framed my presentation is just I'm raising the basic framework in which we are living, the economic framework in which we are living. And in that particular framework, what is the need and what is the importance of budgetary allocation for various social concerns, and what are the trends that we are observing in the last few years. So when we juxtapose the current macroeconomic scenario and the trends, probably it gives us an insight in which direction we are going. So my presentation is going to be very brief, and these are very known facts. So I'm very quickly saying, yes, on one hand, our economic survey says our economy has grown at 8.2% in the last year, and it is projecting, owing to the international uncertainties and not the domestic uncertainties. International uncertainties, it is becoming little moderate in projecting the next coming years GDP growth at around 7%. Now, when we talk about GDP, GDP basically has four components: consumption, investments, government expenditure, and national net exports. And when we try to see that out of these four components, which component has grown fast, and what does that mean? So when we see about C, that is the personal final consumption expenditure, PFC, the growth of that is only 4%. That means out of the 8.2% overall GDP growth rate, the consumption, which is the largest component of the GDP, has grown only by 4%. The consumption is one component in GDP which actually reflects the population's participation or their well-being and their buying capacity and their earnings in the economy. So if you want to understand that how an average citizen economic condition is, probably out of this four component, it is the C which gives us that particular idea. That means that 8.2% of the GDP, there is a discrepancy between 8.2% growth rate in the overall GDP, which comprises of C, I, G, and Annex, whereas C is growing only at the 4%. Against that, I, that is another important component, that is investment, that is gross final capital formation, that has grown at 9%, much higher than the GDP growth rate. Whereas government expenditure, which used to be around 2.1%, has grown at 2.5%, probably because there is a lot of debt, there's a lot of money going in the debt repayment, and against that, the government is also spending a lot of money for many other things. So probably there is a marginal rise in G, and Annex as usual is a negative. So if we focus on these two, this gives us an idea about exactly where the growth comes from. The growth basically comes from the heavy investment that is taking place in the country, and not by the individual people who are contributing to the economy. Having said that, this leads us to, gives us an insight in understanding the pattern of our economic growth, which obviously, as widely discussed, is talking about, is showing the high income inequality. The Paris-based World Inequality Lab recently has also shown that around, when we talk about income and wealth shares in the country, so only 1% of the Indian owns 22.6% of income and 40.1% of the wealth. These are now the known fact. So this shows how unequal distribution and how this inequality is growing. The recent, just before election, when Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, which said they are going to feed 81 crore, that is almost 2/3 of the population for the coming next year, also gives us an indication the misery and the dire situation in which a large number of population are living. Why I'm saying all this when we are talking about budget? That is because when we talk about budget, one of the important policy objective of fiscal policy is to attain distributive justice by redistribution of the income. That means taxing high income people and distributing it to the poorer and the underprivileged segment of the society. So when we talk about the India's tax structure, we see that the 48.5% of the revenue comes from the indirect tax, which is highly regressive in nature. even the countries where the inequality is not so drastic as India is, like OECD countries, where also the percentage of the proportion of the indirect tax is only 30 to 35%. It ranges between them, right? If we look at the direct taxes, right, which are supposed to be progressive in nature, the higher the income, higher the tax that you pay. Even in that, the corporate tax, which is the most high generating GDP, where the growth is the maximum, their contribution is only 17%, whereas the personal income tax contribution is 19%. That means the direct taxes, which are supposed to be progressive, are also not truly progressive. So, having said this, that means our fiscal structure is not very conducive or not very supportive to the section of the society which requires a support, right? And that is what brings us to talk about what is happening into various social sector on which a large proportion of Indian depends on, right? So if we look at again that yeah. So when we talk about, again, how do we measure why people are not able to cope up? Again, that is reflected in the unemployment rate, which is 8%. Good part of this budget is for the first time, it is almost, it is acknowledged by the government, it is acknowledged by the policymaker that unemployment is a serious concern. And so the economic survey as well as the finance minister's speech both actually openly acknowledges this and focuses the policy measures towards that. How effective they are going to be are already concerns have been raised by the previous speaker. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm still talking about the inequality that is. So since we are living in a society where the economic benefits are being appropriated by a very small segment and large number of population requires support from the government, government do say that out of the total 9 priority area, human resource development and social justice is our priority. And accordingly, it do allocate 56,501 crores of rupees. That is approximately 2% higher than the last year's allocation. But this is in monetary terms. That means if in the last year's average inflation has been 4%. So if we adjust this with the inflation rate, then it will be in a real terms, this budget allocation is lower than, will turn out to be lower than what it has been last year. I have not calculated what exactly in the real terms it might be, but it is obvious it has grown at 2%, inflation is rising at 4%. So obviously it has devalued the allocation that it comes. Here are some interesting data, right? Comparing budget estimate of the budgetary allocation last year, the estimated budget, the revised estimates, and these are this year's budget. So we have these 3 columns. And when we talk about education, we see there is a rise this rise is showing the column 2 and the difference between column 2 and column 3. Budgetary allocation has increased, skill development and entrepreneurship. This has increased very, very significantly. Sorry. This has increased very, very significantly. But in rest of the sector, the rise is very, very small. But more interestingly, what is the difference between the estimated budget allocation and the revised allocation? And as we can see that except for education, rest of the all area, the revised estimates of the revised budget is negative. That means whatever was allocated is not spent, right? So in terms of health, it is minus 8,637. In tribal affairs, it is minus 4,856. I mean, of course, this runs in crores. So this is a significant gap between what originally was allocated and how much money it is spent. That means whatever the numbers we are given in the budget, not necessarily portray the right picture in which government is actually leading this particular sector. In almost every sector, we see that the allocation, even the allocation is declining. If we take a long term, if we don't compare the 2 years, just the budget allocation of this year compared to last year, and take a little longer terms trend, we see that almost in most areas which are of a concern, but budgetary allocation of government has continuously gone down as a percentage of the total budget, right? Manarega, say, even the food subsidy, though the amount of food subsidy which has been spent in last 3-4 years is very high, but despite of that, compared to 15-16, that proportion has gone down. So even including education, that proportion has gone down. The Hindu newspaper made my life little easier by giving these charts. I have borrowed these charts from Hindu, right, which shows from 2016 to 24-25 budget, and it shows that in health there is a reduction in the allocation. I can't read this. Right, even in education it is less. Old age pension, which Mr. Mishra was talking about, has also gone down. Widow pension scheme has also gone down. Ayushman Bharat has remained consistent in last 3 years. That is a insurance based health scheme. Otherwise, all these major schemes allocation has gone down. If we yeah, so in health, in social school education, the percentage has gone down. Social welfare, the percentage has gone down. Manarega has gone down. All these major heads on which we are spending the budget, I mean, that has gone down. Though they are very, very minor, and despite of that, that proportion is going down. If we are talking about the social sector, obviously the SC/ST budget needs to be talked about, because they need the maximum support, because even after 75 years of independence, you know, they're still struggling to be mainstream. And as we see that for neither SC budget or not the ST budget, there is a significant rise in that. Worse than that, I was just referring to site by the Dalit organization, and they mentioned that there is zero allocation for National Scheduled Caste Finance Development Corporation and National Safai Karmachari Finance Development Corporation. There is no allocation. And these are very, very crucial schemes for supporting, their small businesses as well, and supporting them otherwise economically. And as it has been discussed by my previous panelists, that the post-matric scheme allocation has also for SC has slightly reduced, though for ST it has slightly come up. Yes, a positive note, Eklavya school allocation has increased, and which is a good thing. But otherwise, overall picture shows us that though even we talk about social inclusion as one of the priority, but that is not reflected in our trends, the way in which we are spending money. Yes. So, gender budgeting. Yes, the allocation of 3.2 lakh crore is highest so far in the gender budgeting. The maximum amount of that is shown in the Manarega, and the total allocation for Manarega actually has gone down. So how to decipher these still is another academic exercise. How to actually understand this number game. Good thing what has happened is there are two important good things, as long as the women, the gender budget and the initiatives that they have talked about on the women is. Number one, they have identified that women's participation, labor force participation is low, and there are two important reasons that they are addressing. Number one, because of a poor skills of the women, because they remain in the traditional segment, women are, just going out of the labor force, because there is not much demand for this traditional skills. So there is, in the Skill India program, there is a lot of emphasis on giving skills related to the STEM sector, that is a science, technology, engineering, and maths. So probably there is this acknowledgement how much money will go for that and how effective it will be. It's a different story altogether. And but at least there is this acknowledgement. And second very important acknowledgement is that there is an investment in the care economy. And because the care economy in the rural area is like one of the important constraints women are not able to go out and participate because childcare or the old age people's care becomes a very crucial responsibility for women. That particular fact is been acknowledged and the money has been allotted for crèche. They are planning to have 17,000 crèche across the country, and for that 2,300 crores rupees are allocated. Of course, this is a first step and there is a long way to go, and so but at least there is an open acknowledgement about this, which is a good sign. So in short, the social sector allocations are probably in terms of numbers are marginally higher when we do not adjust them with inflation. But in general, they show a declining trend, and which is a serious concern towards our commitment towards a inclusive growth. So, and this budget is also saying nothing much about these areas of concerns. Thank you.
Okay, so I think you have also taken care of the women in the Skill India as well as STEM. So I think we can turn to Deepa Pawar, who is working with the nomadic tribes, and she is also working in the area of education, empowerment and mobilization. So Deepa ji, आप ये बजट में ये बजट के बारे में आपके विचार बताएंगे? या
ओके,
हाँ,
मेरा आवाज सुनाई दे रहा है विभूति जी?
अच्छे से
ओके,
सुनाई दे रहा है।
तो सबको जय भीम और जिंदाबाद। जब से निर्मला सीतारामन जी ने बजट पेश किया है, इंटरनेट के समय पे भी हम बात कर रहे थे, और जब उन्होंने इतना 1.25 घंटा 1.5 घंटा जो बजट पेश किया, हम काफी ढूंढने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि जो नोमैडिक डिनोटिफाइड ट्राइब, माइग्रेटरी ट्राइब, अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर में काम करने वाले लोग, जो काफी लेबर फोर्स के साथ जुड़े हुए लोग हैं, उनके लिए बजट क्या बताने की कोशिश कर रहा है। तो काफी बिटर ट्रूथ मुझे लग रहा है कि बताते हुए एक्चुअली दुख लग रहा है, क्योंकि ये बजट अभी सामने भी आ गया है। तो बजट के नंबर्स और सारी चीजें तो हमारे सामने है, जो कई रिपोर्ट्स में और हमारे प्रेजेंटेशन में भी सामने आ रही है। मुझे एक दो चीजें बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट लग रही है कि सरकार के आखिर पॉलिटिकल विल क्या है, उनकी राजकीय इच्छा शक्ति क्या है, वो किन के साथ खड़ा होना चाहते हैं, वो किन के लिए ये बजटरी प्रोविजन लेके आए हैं। तो जितना आर्टिकुलेट करने की कोशिश की, कुछ मुद्दे हैं मेरे पास छोटे मोटे, जितना आर्टिकुलेट करने की कोशिश की, उसके अंदर जो सबसे पहली जो मेरी कम्युनिटी है, नोमैडिक एंड डिनोटिफाइड ट्राइब, काफी शॉकिंग नहीं लगा, ये एक्सपेक्टेड ही था, क्योंकि ये बहुत ही अनकाउंट कम्युनिटी पॉलिटिकल डिसीजन मेकर के भी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में है, कि उन्होंने डीएनटी बोर्ड को 5 करोड़ रुपीस दिया है। और मैं सोच रही थी कि अगर हमारा पॉपुलेशन कुछ 10 करोड़ या 11 करोड़ के आसपास भी है, तो क्या गवर्नमेंट हर डीएनटी पर्सन को 1 रुपया या 8 आना देना चाहता है? उनका बजट, आवाज आ रहा है?
आ रहा है, अच्छे से आ रहा है।
हाँ, तो डेवलपमेंट एंड वेलफेयर, अच्छा मेरे सामने ही है, तो डेवलपमेंट एंड वेलफेयर बोर्ड फॉर डिनोटिफाइड और नोमैडिक सेमी नोमैडिक कम्युनिटीज के लिए 5 करोड़ का बजट करना, मुझे लगता है काफी हिम्मत है इस सरकार की। और जो नोमैडिक डिनोटिफाइड लोग नेशन वाइड ओबीसीज में आते हैं, कुछ एनटीज में आते हैं, कुछ एसटीज में आते हैं, ना ही सेंट्रलाइज आइडेंटिटी है, लेकिन अगर फिर भी रेमके कमीशन के दौरान भी देखिए कि हमारा 10 से 11% अगर पॉपुलेशन है, तो 5 करोड़ का बजट एनटी एससी और इन कम्युनिटीज को देना, ये थोड़ा मुझे काफी मजाक लग रहा है। सोशल जस्टिस एंड मिनिस्ट्री ने जो सीड का इंटरिम बजट में भी हमने थोड़ा सा डिस्कस किया था, उसका बजट जो है वो 15 करोड़ के आसपास भी पर ईयर खर्च नहीं हो पा रहा है। तो मेरे दिमाग में आ रहा है कि बजटरी प्रोविजंस के साथ इंडिकेटर, प्रोसेस, एग्जीक्यूशन, जिसे हम कहें कि इवोल्यूशन और मॉनिटरिंग, एग्जीक्यूशन के मेथोडोलॉजी क्या होंगे, कौन करेगा, कौन से कमिटीज होंगे, कौन से ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस होंगे, इसके बारे में क्लैरिटी कौन दे पाएगा? क्योंकि बजट इसी तरह से बहुत कम खर्च होंगे और धीरे धीरे लैप्स हो जाएंगे और अगले साल लगेगा कि इन कम्युनिटी को और समुदाय को जो है वो बिल्कुल भी जगह नहीं है। नेशनल कमीशन फॉर शेड्यूल ट्राइब का इकोनॉमिक टाइम्स में अगर हम देख रहे हैं तो 38 करोड़ का बजट है। तो ये बजट के जब स्मॉल नंबर में देख रही हूँ तो बार बार वही डिमांड फिर से आ रहा है कि गवर्नमेंट को पता है हमारा पॉपुलेशन कितना है, हम कितने नंबर में इस देश में रहते हैं, और अगर पॉपुलेशन पता है तो इतने स्मॉल साइज बजट हम कहाँ पे यूज करेंगे, हमारे डेवलपमेंट और एग्जिस्टेंस के लिए ये कहाँ पे काम आएंगे, इसके लिए अवेयरनेस मुझे बहुत ही कम दिख रहा है। बैकवर्ड क्लासेस के लिए 21 करोड़ का बजट दिया है। बहुत ही स्मॉल साइज बजट है। इसके अंदर मैं कहूँगी कि मतलब सच में डेवलपमेंट तो आप छोड़िए, लेकिन आपको अगर कोई बेस भी बनाना हो तो वो इसके अंदर नहीं बन सकता है। सारे लोगों जैसे कह रहे हैं कि ये बजट जो है वो स्किल के ऊपर बहुत ज्यादा फोकस्ड कर रहा है, वो कंपनीज के अंदर इंटर्नशिप दे रहा है, वो कंपनी को जो है वो पर पर्सन कुछ 3000 रुपीज वगैरह दे रहा है, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को काफी जो है प्रमोट कर रहा है। तो इसका अगर मोटा मोटी एक अर्थ निकालेंगे तो काफी लग रहा है कि कैपिटलिज्म और कंपनी को कहाँ से फायदा होगा, कंपनीज का कहाँ पे इन्वेस्ट करेगी, कंपनी के लिए क्या राहत रहेगी। तो एक कैपिटलिज्म का जो वर्ड है, जो क्लासिस्ट सोसाइटी से आता है, वहां पे जो हम तोड़ने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, बिल्कुल स्किल डेवलपमेंट जरूरी है, काफी इंडस्ट्रीज में हमारे एंट्रेंस होने जरूरी है, हमारे डिस्कोर्सेज जरूरी है, लेकिन बाकी का जो एक डिग्निफाइड जिसे हम कहे अप्रोच होना चाहिए, सोशल जस्टिस का अप्रोच होना चाहिए, वो काफी लैक नजर आ रहा है कि कंपनी का मैन्युफैक्चरिंग बढ़े, कंपनी के अंदर 5000 के स्टाइपेंड के ऊपर लोग काम करें, तो इसको हम सोशल सिक्योरिटी, सेफ्टी, सोशल जस्टिस, डिग्निफाइड प्रोसेस के इसके अंदर इसको क्या हम मार्किंग कर पाएंगे, वो समझ में नहीं आ रहा है। हमारे कई साथियों ने उनके भी प्रेजेंटेशन में बोला जो कि ड्रोन दीदी जैसे स्कीम है। मैं सोच रही हूँ कि जहाँ पे एग्रीकल्चर सच में हमारे इंडियन फार्मर्स को नेचुरल एग्रीकल्चर सिखाने की जरूरत है, वो कौन सिखाएगा, कौन सी कंपनी सिखाएगी? ड्रोन बनाएंगे वो कौन सी कंपनी सिखाएंगी, उनके ऑर्डर्स किसको मिलेंगे, इसके अंदर एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन जो है वो ग्राउंड कम्युनिटीज का किसका होगा? तो मुझे कई सारे सवालों के जवाब जो जब मैं इस बजट को देख रही हूँ तो मिल नहीं रहे, और मुझे लग रहा है कि काफी इंटरकनेक्शन है जहाँ पे थोड़ा सा कास्ट की अंडरस्टैंडिंग हमें है ही नहीं। इंडिया का पूरा जो सिस्टम है वो कास्ट हायरार्की के ऊपर है, कास्ट डोमिनेंस के ऊपर खड़ा है, कास्ट रिलेटेड वायलेंस के ऊपर खड़ा है। तो अगर हमें इस तरह के जो ग्रास रूट में बसे हुए समुदाय है उनके बारे में अगर सोचना होगा तो गवर्नमेंट का, निर्मला जी ने 7वीं बार लगातार बजट पेश किया है, इतना विक्रम उन्होंने किया है, लेकिन वो विक्रम के अंदर ग्रास रूट कम्युनिटीज कहीं भी नजर नहीं आ रही है। काफी कंपनी कैपिटल और कैपिटलिज्म फोकस्ड बजट है, कंपनीज को ज्यादा इन्वॉल्व होंगे, वो ज्यादा डेवलप कर जाएंगे, उस तरह का बजट जो है वो नजर आ रहा है। आप किसी भी तरह की स्कीम अगर ले लेते हैं, जैसे एक स्कीम मेरे नजरों से के नीचे से गई है कि सपोर्ट फॉर मार्जिनलाइज इंडिविजुअल लाइवलीहुड एंटरप्राइजेस, जिसके अंदर हम रिहैबिलिटेशन और बेगिंग करने वाले कम्युनिटीज को देख रहे हैं। तब मैं देखती हूँ कि एनटीडीएनटी के अंदर एक बहुत बड़ा पोर्शन ऑफ कास्ट कम्युनिटीज है, जनजातियां है, जो बेगिंग रिलेटेड, स्ट्रीट परफॉर्मेंस, आर्ट परफॉर्मेंस रिलेटेड ऑक्यूपेशन के दौरान अपनी उपजीविका चलाते हैं। उसको 98 करोड़ का बजट जो है वो गवर्नमेंट ने दिया हुआ है। काफी दुख की बात हो रही है, जो दलित मूवमेंट्स ने भी काफी आवाज उठाया इसके बारे में, वो बात कर रहे हैं कि सफाई कर्मचारी वेलफेयर को हम कैसे 0.01 का बजट मुहैया करवा सकते हैं। क्या यहाँ पे सोशल जस्टिस की कोई भी एथिकल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी नहीं है कि हम इतने ज्यादा स्कैवेंजिंग और मैनहोल में अपनी जान गंवाने वाले लोगों की जिसे हम कहे कि नंबर है, लेकिन 0.01 का बजट देना, ये सच में किसी कम्युनिटी का एक तरह से मतलब सेंसिटिविटी बहुत कम नजर आ रही है। यहाँ पे दलित कम्युनिटी ने तो दलित कम्युनिटी और ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस ने बोला है कि नंबर के अंदर अब भी कितना डिफरेंसेस है। तो विभूति जी, मुझे कई चीजें ऐसे लग रहा है कि एक तो सरकार की मंशा क्या है, सरकार किसके साथ खड़ा है, वो किसकी वकालत कर रहा है। मिडिल क्लास के बारे में हम काफी सोच रहे हैं कि इनकम टैक्स के अंदर, स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन के अंदर इतने चेंजेस हुए हैं, 15 लाख के बाद आपको 30% टैक्स भरना है, या 10 से 12 लाख का इनकम है तो इतना परसेंटेज टैक्स भरना है। और मिडिल क्लास के बारे में बात भी हो रही है, जो जरूरी ही है क्योंकि टैक्स पेयर एक लार्जर कम्युनिटी है वो। लेकिन मैं सोच रही हूँ कि जो टैक्स पे करने के भी इनकम क्राइटेरिया के अंदर नहीं आते हैं, जो लोन के अंदर फंसे हुए हैं अपने सिंपल फूड ग्रेन्स चलाने के लिए, तो जिनकी इतनी मंथली आय या एनुअल आय कम है, जिनके पास रोजगार ही नहीं है, उनके अपलिफ्टमेंट के लिए खास कुछ मेरा बहुत एक्सपेक्टेशन था कि ये इलेक्शन बहुत ही, जिसे हम कहे कि एक बहुत ही कम्पिटिटिव इलेक्शंस हुए हैं। और यहाँ पे बजट को देखने का नजरिया आम लोगों का था कि इतने कंपटीशन के बाद सरकार अपनी जगह बनाएगी बजट को रिप्रेजेंट करते हुए, कि हम इतना इंटरसेक्शनल, इंक्लूसिव और जस्टिस की ओर लेके जाने वाला बजट बनाएगी कि लोगों को वो देखकर ट्रस्ट बिल्ड होगा। लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि ये बजट की बड़ी गलतियां हुई है कि लोगों का ट्रस्ट वो फिर से खोने वाले हैं, क्योंकि ग्रास रूट की जो मेजर पॉपुलेशन है उनको मिरर में कुछ दिखाई नहीं दे रहा है कि हमारी भूख, हमारा रोजगार, जैसे हम देख रहे हैं कि एजुकेशन लोन के अंदर भी सब्सिडी दी गई है, लेकिन गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स के लिए, आश्रमशाला के लिए यहाँ पे किस तरह के मतलब प्रोविजन जो किए जाएंगे। ओवरसीज स्कॉलरशिप के बारे में भी हमारे किसी साथी ने बात की। वहाँ का बजट तो देखते हुए मुझे लग रहा है कि अगर ये बजट कुछ एसटी पॉपुलेशन के लिए 10 करोड़ है, एससी पॉपुलेशन के लिए 23 करोड़ है, ओबीसी के लिए 58 करोड़ है, इसके अंदर कितने यूथ पढ़ेंगे? इसको पॉपुलेशन से मल्टीप्लाई अगर करेंगे तो नेशन वाइड के हम 10, 12, 20 बच्चों की बात कर रहे हैं ओवरसीज स्कॉलरशिप के अंदर। अगर हमें फॉरेन रिलेटेड स्कॉलरशिप की बात करनी है तो वहाँ पे कितने एससी एसटी के बच्चे पढ़ेंगे इन स्कॉलरशिप्स के अंदर? कितने पॉपुलर 5 करोड़ एससी के लिए, मेरे ख्याल से अगर 1.5 से 2 करोड़ की स्कॉलरशिप एक बच्चे को लगती है तो इसके अंदर हम 10 से 15 बच्चे भी नहीं कवर कर पाएंगे। तो हमारा जो एक करंट है इंटरनेशनल वॉइसेस में जाने का, पार्टिसिपेशन का, लीडरशिप का, उसके बारे में लैक ऑफ सोशल जस्टिस अप्रोच मुझे बहुत नजर आ रहा है। मैं तो एंटी नोमैडिक डिनोटिफाइड ट्राइब की तो बात भी नहीं कर पा रही हूँ, क्योंकि मुझे कहीं भी वो उस तरह से नजर नहीं आ रहा है। वो इंक्लूसिविटी कहिए या वो इंटरसेक्शनलिटी कहिए, वो नजर नहीं आ रही है। लेकिन अगर एससी और एसटी की भी बात करें तो कितने बच्चे हम इन स्कॉलरशिप्स के अंदर भेजेंगे, और कितने
Hello, Deepa ji. Hello, we have lost you. Hello. हेलो हेलो दीपा जी, यू आर म्यूटेड। आप अपना शुरू कीजिए। हाँ, बोलिए। हेलो दीपा जी ने हमारे सामने बहुत ही दमदार बजट एनालिसिस रखा
तो
है और प्रश्न भी लगाए। हाँ, बोलिए बोलिए। बोलो बोलो
तो विभूति जी, मैं जब सोच रही हूँ कि सारे ही देश के अंदर जो भी नागरिक रहते हैं उनके हेल्थ की जिम्मेदारी किसकी होगी? वो कंपनीज की होगी कि वो सरकार की होगी? हमें सरकार की फैसिलिटी तक पहुंचना है तो कंपनी के दरवाजे नहीं, उनसे ही हो रहा है। यस, कि कंपनी के दरवाजे खटखटाते हुए हम आगे पहुंचेंगे, या हम सरकार के ऊपर ट्रस्ट कर पाएंगे कि हम आपको पैरेंट रोल में देखते हैं, राइट? हम आपको बात कर सकते हैं। तो बहुत ही सरकारी फैसिलिटी सर्विसेज जिसे हम कहे वो आउटसोर्स करने की बहुत बड़ी मंशा भी मुझे यहाँ पे नजर आ रही है कि ये काम करेंगे कौन, तो वो कंपनियों को दिए जा रहे हैं। और थोड़ा सा बैकग्राउंड रिसर्च करने के बाद मुझे समझ में आ रहा है कि जैसे वाटर ट्रीटमेंट के 100 सिटीज, लार्जर सिटीज के अंदर जो सैनिटेशन एंड सॉलिड वेस्ट के अंदर जो बजट है जो 100 सिटीज के अंदर किए जाएंगे, एक आर्टिकल नजरों के नीचे से गया जहाँ पे टॉप कंपनीज उस तरह के प्रोडक्शन के अंदर कंपटीशन कर रही है जिसके अंदर जिसे हम कहें अंबानी और इस तरह के कंपनीज के नाम है, राइट? तो ये जो प्रोडक्ट होंगे, ये जो वाटर ट्रीटमेंट की कंपनी को जिसे हम कहें कि कोलेब्रेशंस होंगे, उसके अंदर ग्रास रूट एससी एसटी माइग्रेटरी प्रकल्पग्रस्त, ये सारे लोग क्या अचीव कर पाएंगे? मतलब इनका शेयर होल्डिंग क्या होगा? इनको कम नजर आ रहा है। काफी
हाँ, दीपा जी, आपने बहुत ही
ओके।
महत्व के प्रश्न खड़े किए हैं और आपने आपके पीपीटी में आपने जो महत्व की जो समुदाय छूट गए हैं, जो हाशिए में रहे हैं, उनके सवालों को बहुत ही मजबूती के साथ आपने बाहर लाया है। और ये बात कि सरकार की मंशा क्या है, क्यों इतना अपमानजनक एलोकेशन हुआ है, यूनिट कॉस्ट भी इतनी कम आती है। तो अभी हमने बहुत ही, आप सभी सातों लोगों ने इतने दमदार प्रेजेंटेशन दिया है. So now the floor is open for discussion. Reith, you can invite questions.
Yes. So the floor is open for questions from the audience. If anyone has a question, you can raise your hands or type in the Q&A box.
You can also unmute and speak. Otherwise, I'll ask the panelists to have their roundup and pathway for future. They can speak about it. So can we start with Dr. Paramita, Professor Paramita Saha? Hello.
Let me unmute.
Can you summarize your points in 2 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Do you have anything to say about the pathway for future?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I was mesmerized by all the presentation that has been made and so many important points that have been raised. Still, I feel in line with what the last speaker was saying, that budget is not only a financial statement, it's also a political statement. I started with that statement that it shows with whom the government is staying and what their priorities are. Even after saying that, even though the very required emphasis on agriculture is back, the emphasis on employment is back, I would say that that's a good round, but we should not forget the points where the areas where the cracks are showing, and the areas which we shouldn't forget: the informal sector employees, the unorganized sector employees, the employees in the gig work, the platform workers, their rights and their protections. And I also feel finally that the importance of public intervention still remains in generating employment, in providing healthcare services and education. And this cannot be, handed over to a corporate world entirely. That's what I feel should be the final.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah. Now I request Professor Manimekalai. Yeah,
thank you. One point which I missed that, and then we go forward. That is the formalization of jobs through incentives to register with EPFO. That is a good move, but at the same time, it is linked to the response to industry. That is the bothering aspect, where government sponsored internships, there is a 2 lakh crore for 5 years allocated, but it is linked to the response of the industry. That is one where the private sector to meet the subsidy scheme from their CSR. So far, the CSR is the corporate social responsibility would be something to the society. The industries will be doing, but now it is connected to their, this kind of schemes. And that is the point which it's very difficult for them, or we are drawing. They will definitely withdraw in the name of incentivizing all these things. So that is one concern which I wanted to say, but and thanks to this there is a slight increase in gender budgeting. So the kind of voices from the women's groups, women's organizations heard of, and there is an inclusion of Part C also in this budget. It was only Part A and Part B, and of course Kerala, Tamil Nadu government, etc. were doing that already. So 3 important takeaways or kind of communicating as far as this budget is concerned. One is that the special focus on the marginalized in terms of particularly the migrant workers and victims of natural disasters and the riverbank dwellers, etc. They are the most vulnerable, apart from the other marginalized. So their life is always under threat, and something has to be done to capture their need, cater to their needs. And second, in the name of providing infrastructure and other basic needs, and of course the livelihood and food security strengthening through PDS, because now that is also under threat, and enhance employment with long-term sustenance, like providing incentives or other issues would be serving the short-term purposes, but that immediate needs is of course required, but at the same time with the long-term sustenance, whatever the employment strategies or livelihood strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Manimekalai. You have answered the question raised by Madam Sulochana. What more could have been done for low-income women in this budget, which has been missed out, and that to help these women to manage their household expenditure, especially when not much support is there from the male partners. And now I think now we are also at the Mr. Raghuveer Kelkar has asked question on climate change. I'm sure Dr. Aditi Kapoor, you have read it. It is there in the chat box. Preet, you can, tell.
Yes, ma'am. Raghuveer, do you want to go ahead and ask your question, or should I read it out loud?
Yeah, please.
So I
introduce yourself, sir. Yeah.
Okay, no, I'm not the sir. I'm still a student. I'm a PhD student, currently based in Australia, and I was a student of Dr. Aditi Madam in St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. So on the climate change, Dr. Neha she gave some insights.
No, Dr. Aditi Kapoor gave. Dr. Aditi Kapoor gave.
Dr. Aditi Kapoor, yeah. So I just want to ask her, in how many years will the common household realize the benefits in the reduced cost of energy in the current energy infrastructure? Because the one-time cost of buying and implementing the solar panels in the household energy sector is very high. And if it is very high, why will the common household actually go towards having a solar energy panel in their house if the current energy cost is very low, and if he has to wait for 20 to 25 years to realize the cost benefits of switching to clean energy resources? That's my question. And what should the government do to it? Because in 2015, India joined the Global Solar Alliance. Still, the government has not made any substantial budget allocation for subsidizing the solar panels and the other clean energy resources.
So the way the scheme works is that the solar panels are subsidized, and the cost has gone down substantially over the years. And it doesn't, so the panels, if you put, it will be highly subsidized, and you can get zero bill from the first year itself. And whatever extra solar power is generated on your rooftop, you can sell it to the local grid. And then, so that's what you're storing. So whenever you want to use, you can actually draw from there. And if there are ways in which you can also earn from there. So it's not that you'll be spending anything on your electricity. Once you agree to put those on your roof, then you will actually be supplying to the local grid. So you become a supplier of energy and your own bill goes to zero. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Now you're summing up, Dr. Aditi. Yeah.
My summing up?
Yeah.
Well, in one line, far more to be done, and I completely agree with Deepa Pawar that well, I wouldn't say that there is no provision for work at the grassroots, because if you look at our policies, then we are looking at the governments repeatedly saying that please make village development plans, the Gram Panchayat development plans, the guidelines have been revised a couple of years back. They do bring in participatory activities to make those plans. So I wouldn't say that the central government sitting in New Delhi, Raisina Road, is going to deliver, right to the grassroots all over India. I think all these sectors that we are talking about, whether it's agriculture, water, housing, livelihoods, all these are state subjects. And some states do better than others. So I think state governance is a very, very big issue. Of course, budgets are political. So, but budgets are political in the sense that it depends again on the state government, how much they can maneuver and negotiate to get more money, to get more schemes. But the actual implementation then, depends really on how much are you promoting agriculture, the schemes, how much are you promoting the self-help groups, how much are you giving leeway to panchayats. So, it's easier to just sit and say, well, the center has not done anything and the budget has not done anything. I think the budget has to be read in association with the larger policies that we have. So there is progressively, I have seen that over the last 2 decades, there has been a progressive decentralization of policies, whether it's to do with your disaster plans, whether it's to do with your development plans. But I think 2 things is, one, the ability of grassroots people and non-government organizations and research institutions to galvanize and push for better implementation. I think that is something, it's not a supplier's world, it's also a demand world. So I think that is something that needs to be done. And today the social media is good enough for, getting to know a lot of things. So I think, and I don't want to sound political by saying, man ki baat hai, ya ye hai, wo hai, but the man ki baat, the Twitters, the Facebook, all this shows that actually a lot of is there on social media and everybody has their cell phones. So I think there's a lot more that needs to be said rather than just confine ourselves to the union budget. So I think that's what I'd like to say. So of course, lots to be done. And, as a gender enthusiast, I can just cry myself to sleep. But I think there's a lot that we can do. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Aditi. Now, Dr. Aditi Sawant, your last words. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. So just to sum up, I feel that the grassroots development is very important. And I feel that education sector has a larger role to play. And during my presentation, I mentioned that education has to, the overall structure of the education system has to be changed or has to undergo change. And more of vocational and professional training is required. It's not just job oriented, but at the same time, developing that tendency or the mindset where you can start your business, that entrepreneurship skill development. No doubt government is, working on that line. Like some funds are also allocated. But when you look at the grassroots level what is happening. The society is not ready to take the change because the training is not imparted. The education system is not designed in such a way that we can, we can start our own business immediately. And that's why when I look at the agriculture sector, where on one hand we are facing problems of farmer suicide, it's a result of so many things. It's not just that education or the things, but they are not getting the right price for their food product, and at the same time they are not having the access to the market. That's why giving the access to the market and providing that kind of platform, that is the need of an hour. And in this budget I find that that kind of extension service or the expenditure on the extension service is missing. And that's why I said that this budget is a bandage budget, like giving some relief here and there, but not solving the fundamental issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Natesan. Now, Dr. Neha Shah. Yeah.
I'll be also very brief in concluding because since 91, we have very rapidly moved towards the market economy. We have left a lot of things to be done by the market, and the corporates have grown, profits have grown. But along with that, we also know that the income inequality has also widened. So, and when we talk about the fiscal policy, the role of fiscal policy is always very limited. It is just one aspect of the total policy. It cannot do the revolutionary change. But most important role of the fiscal policy is that it involves government expenditure. Now, when a lot of things are being left to market and a lot of responsibilities are given to the market, I think the focus of the fiscal policy these days should be towards the segment of the society who are left behind in the train of the development. So in terms of, empowering them by providing, skilling them, providing them education, providing them the good health, and as well as integrating them with whatever the mainstream development that is taking place. Because if that is not the focus, in that case, this gap is going to widen. Market is not going to take care of that. Market is going in a direction, and it has been seen very clearly, the market is going in a direction where there is a concentration of economic resources. So fiscal policy can play this very important role in integrating the need of the people and trying to bring them into the mainstream. So I think there should be focus of the budgetary policies, especially the expenditure aspect of government towards this aspect. So
thank you, Dr. Neha Shah. Now, Sailesh Mishra ji.
Yes, I would like to end with as a senior citizen, we expect empathy. We don't want sympathy from our lawmakers. We need to look beyond subsidy. We need to look beyond Tirth Yatras, and we look beyond symbolic distribution of assistive devices. We need constructive action plan with budgetary allocation for senior citizens. This decade is very crucial for India. If we don't look beyond youth, we will create our golden asset as a liability. Look at Japan, China, EU. They are struggling to look after their older people. So we don't need slogans. We don't need announcement. We need concrete steps to safeguard our old people, their security, human rights, dignity of 149 million. We believe as an organization and joint action committee, unless you have single nodal agency, like single nodal department, like we are demanding National Commission for Senior Citizens or the ministry to look after 149 grandparents. Otherwise, we'll continue to have stepmotherly treatment. Remember, we all will grow old, and by 2050, there will be 375 million seniors. We all need Vikshit Bharat, but not without our old people. Leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you. A very powerful statement, Mr. Sailesh ji. Now, I think the last word, our superstar, Deepa Pawar. Okay? Yeah, Deepa.
Okay.
Yeah.
बजट देखकर तो हम सुपरस्टार नहीं लग रहे वैसे विभूति जी।
नहीं, बोले।
हमारे स्टार बहुत अंधेरे में है। हाँ। और जैसे हमारे कोई साथी भी बोल रहे कि ऑब्वियस है कि दिल्ली में बैठकर हर चीजें नहीं हो सकती है, लेकिन दिल्ली में बैठकर बहुत कुछ चीजें होती है, ये भी नकारा नहीं जा सकता है। केंद्र सरकार के पास हम बहुत अपेक्षाओं से देखते हैं। केंद्र सरकार के हाथ में एक लार्जर पावर है, कई इंस्टीट्यूशन ऑफ पावर है। तो मैं अपने लास्ट वर्ड में 2-3 चीजें ब्रीफली कहना चाहूंगी कि हमें टेम्पररी डेवलपमेंट नहीं चाहिए, तो सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट चाहिए। हमें लेबर फोर्स में लेकर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इंडस्ट्री में लाकर कुछ अच्छी चीजें तो जरूर होगी, लेकिन इंटेलेक्चुअल जो हमारे स्पेसेस है, हमारे एजेंसी है, उसको हम क्लेम कैसे कर पाए, ये सरकार का भी उत्तरदायित्व है। जो संविधान उन्हें कहता है, जो ह्यूमन राइट पर्सपेक्टिव उन्हें कहता है, उद्योगपतियों को क्या जरूरत है, उसके अनुसार स्किल डेवलपमेंट होंगे। तो यहाँ पे जो स्किल्स है उसको यूटिलाइज किस तरह से किया जाएगा, या उसके लिए ब्रिज या पाथ किस तरह से बनाए जाएंगे, वो भी काफी ज्यादा जरूरी है। एट्रोसिटी के बारे में मैं अपने बात में बोलना थोड़ा सा स्किप कर गई, लेकिन एट्रोसिटी एक्ट के दौरान 550 इम्प्लीमेंटेशन और एग्जीक्यूशन के लिए 550 करोड़ का बजट है। एनसीआरबी का डेटा कहता है कि 4703 2022 में केसेस है पर पर्सन। अगर हम 2 लाख या बाई केस 8 लाख का गवर्नमेंट से मिलने वाला जो सपोर्ट सिस्टम है, उसको देखकर तो क्या ये बजट इनफ है? तो जहाँ पे डेवलपमेंट की बात है, उसी के साथ जुड़ी रहेगी यहाँ के हायरार्की के थ्रू होते हुए वायलेंस को गवर्नमेंट प्रमोट करेगा, सेव करेगा, वो उन लोगों के साथ खड़ा रहेगा। क्लाइमेट चेंज के अंदर भी 4 से 5 इंडिकेटर मैंने देखे, जैसे वो रिएक्टरी कुछ चीजें तैयार करने वाले हैं, वो रिसर्च करने वाले हैं। सबसे बेसिक चीज है कि जंगल मत तोड़ो, आदिवासियों के जो जंगल है वो सेफ रखो। हमारा ऑक्यूपेशन, हमारा एम्प्लॉयमेंट, हमारे रिचुअल्स, हमारा आर्ट सारा जंगलों से जुड़ा हुआ है। तो मुझे लगता है कि आभासी मतलब इक्विटी की आभासी कल्पनाएं तैयार नहीं करनी चाहिए, इक्विटी की ऑथेंटिक और कॉन्क्रीट कल्पनाएं तैयार करनी चाहिए। और मैं यहाँ पे ही रुकूंगी कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की आभासी कल्पनाओं से डेवलपमेंट नहीं होगा, और बजट का वो बहुत ही इथिकल और कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के उत्तरदायित्व और वचनबद्धता के साथ काम करे। वो वचनबद्धता यहाँ पे कम आ रही है, ऑब्वियस हम डिमांड करते रहेंगे। लास्टली मैं कहूंगी कि सारे स्टेट डिमांड कर रहे हैं, तो ऐसा क्या हो गया कि आंध्र प्रदेश और बिहार का डिमांड सबसे ज्यादा चल गया? तो डिपेंड कि पॉलिटिकल कोलैबोरेशन क्या होता है, उसके ऊपर भी डिमांड काफी ध्यान में रखे जाते हैं। तो होपफुली हम कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन अकाउंटेबिलिटी को लेकर आगे बढ़े।
थैंक यू दीपा जी। आपने जो बाबा साहेब आम्बेडकर, छत्रपति साहू महाराज, सावित्रीबाई फूले, फातिमा शेख की लेगेसी जो हमारी विरासत है, जब भी हम सोशल एक्सक्लूजन और सोशल इंक्लूजन की जब बात करते हैं, हमारे दिमाग में इनकी जो एक लेगेसी 19वीं सदी से चली आई है, वो उसको आपने फिर से दोहराया। यहाँ चैट बॉक्स में बहुत रिनाउंड इकोनॉमिस्ट ऑफ नॉर्थ ईस्ट डॉक्टर अर्चना शर्मा जी लिखती है, एक्सीलेंट प्रेजेंटेशन, लाइक द टर्म बैंडेज बजट एंड Deepa's intriguing question. Do we have to avail government facilities through corporate door? Very important. And the budget is for whom? बहुत ही relevant question आप सातुर. All 7 of you have really enlightened us with very sharp, data-driven and robust analysis. And the important concerns that have emerged is that first is the hunger, the question of how household expenditure. The consumption expenditure data also shows that now consumption, except for Kerala and Tamil Nadu, in none of the states people are able to have more than 2 meals. So they have to skip 1 meal. Another thing is about the whole question of investment in human being in terms of education, skilling, employment, and the well-being of 370 million youth of the country, with special focus on ST, ST, and all others who are at the margin of the economy. Even the schemes meant for rehabilitation of manual scavenger, I think, which has been scrapped, which is extremely objectionable and which is extremely disheartening. Mr. Bezwara Wilson, the Safai Karmachari Andolan's leader, has also demanded a reintroduction of an education scheme for children of sanitation workers, education and employment, and also the of SC, ST minorities is a very important. Minorities, Ministry of Minorities budget has also gone down. Postmaster scholarships have gone down, and the question of reproductive rights and the reproductive health of women. Now also India's maternal mortality rate is 103 women dying, pregnant women dying during maternity out of 1 lakh live births, which is extremely high, except for Kerala, Tamil Nadu. Everywhere this is a very important challenge which the states are facing, and it is in concurrent list. Health is in concurrent list, so I think that has to be the priority. National Commission for Senior Citizens, the demand which I think Mr. Sailesh Mishra ji put forward, and the concerns for senior citizens have emerged very sharply. They are also, the charter of demand is also very asking for the very focused and doable agenda. Condition of women in the workforce, I think, as the way Dr. Manimekalai put forward the women's situation, and I think the Dr. Shah, Professor Shah, and Dr. Aditi Kapoor also brought in the question of women in the farm sector, and then question of informal sector, women in cottage industry, even the plight of gig workers. I think that they all are in need of social security and social protection from the state. When the question of enterprise, we have only 3.76 total among the entrepreneurs. The women are there, and more enabling environment needs to be created, not only by the financial allocation, that is one part, but also by the enabling policies and the support structures. Question of gender-based violence, extremely important. Escalating violence, it has increased. Even according to the official data of National Commission for Women, the variety and intensity of gender-based violence has increased, and for which I think the budget is more or less stagnant. But main thing, the challenge is that non-utilization of funds. So which is very, very important concern, because whether it's a lack of political will of the bureaucrats or the systems and structures, why doesn't the allocated money for Nirbhaya fund get utilized, or the fund allocated for support to why only 5 or 6 states are providing one-stop crisis center? Why the helplines are not working? When the money is parked in the ministry, why doesn't it get utilized? So I think we have a long way to go. And as of now, only 18 states and union territories are doing gender responsive budgeting. In other states, even the process has to start even after 20 years. The gender budgeting came in 2005. And the question of social sector budget and the budget for the marginalized sections, now all of them are articulating. In last 1 week, you must have noticed so many meetings and online meetings and the in-person meetings and press conferences were held by the Dalit organizations, Adivasi organization, minority organization, persons with disability, senior citizens organization. All of them are now very seriously taking this budget, and I think that is this is the kind of lobbying that is required. And the most important thing is gender disaggregated data. Without data, we are shooting in the dark. We know that in a post-pandemic period, there is a lot of debate and controversy around the authenticity of data provided by the international agencies, by the organizations like CMI and other sources, individual researchers' data, and also the official data by NSSO. Census data we don't have, we have only estimates. But I think authenticity of data is also very important. Last but not the least, and I think it was reiterated again and again by last 2 speakers, Mr. Sailesh Mishra ji and Deepa Pawar ji, put it very, very forcefully, that investing in masses or investing in the communities is not an act of charity. It is a fundamental necessity of high economic growth. Thank you very much. Over to IMPRI.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So as we come to an end of today's discussion, I, Reet Lath, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center. I would like to thank all of you for attending today's deliberation, a panel discussion on the Social Inclusion and Union Budget 2024 to 2025, Thematic Deliberations and Analysis of Union Budget 2024 to 2025. We are grateful to our chair for the session, Professor VIBHUTI Patel ji, and our esteemed panelists, Professor N. Manimekalai ji, Shri Sailesh Mishra ji, Ms. Deepa Pawar ji, Dr. Neha Shah ji, Professor Paramita ji, Dr. Aditi Kapoor ji, and Dr. Aditi Sawant ji, for taking part in the discussion and enlightening us. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in to our future IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a very good day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Reed, for moderating the session so well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mishra.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mishra. Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Professor
you.
Saha. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shah. Yeah.
Thank you.